My name is Kirsten McCormick, and the information that I'm presenting today has been part of a passion research project that I've been doing over the course of the last few months, and I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to come and have this conversation started here. So during the pandemic, my kids have always had some limits on their screen time. But during the pandemic, it became really difficult to want to put any kind of limits on that because that was their only way of connecting with the outside world. It was the only way for them to connect with their friends. You know, they wanted to be able to play games online or have video chats or do all the things, a lot of the same things that we as adults were craving because we felt so isolated. And the thing that I observed, though, over the course of the months is that especially my teenagers were becoming more and more withdrawn. And it's like their rooms became dark caves where they would stare at a glowing light for hours and hours a day. And I noticed this having a huge impact on their attitudes, on their behavior, on their ability to interact kindly and respectfully with the rest of the family. And I just, as a mom, noticed a direct correlation with the amount of screen time they had and their ability to interact as social and connecting human beings. And so that planted certain seeds of a desire to be more intentional about the space that I was creating in my home. It was, I had always told, we joked when they were little, like, oh, if you play video games too much, your brain will turn to mush. And they were like, what, really? And so, you know, that little white lie was sort of our family joke of like, play too many video games, your brains turn to mush. But the more time passes, the more I realize that it is a somewhat accurate description of what is happening. Because while I don't think that there is anything wrong with limited use of technology, and technology provides us some of our most fantastic tools, I think that it has a high opportunity cost. And so that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about. A lot of kids and teenagers now are more stressed out, more anxious, and more depressed than we can imagine at their same ages because we did not have the same stress triggers that they have now. Ever since cell phones and social media, these handheld devices that kids could suddenly carry the internet around with them in their pockets, came out in approximately, it was around 2010, 2011, when the personal handheld devices were suddenly in every home. Everyone had them, and we didn't have any data or anything to tell us that they weren't a good thing. Suddenly you could know where your kids were all the time. They could contact you anytime. So there's this suddenly increased safety. And so parents wanted to equip their kids to be the safest they could possibly be. And so we didn't realize that there was an opportunity cost to be had. But since 2010, in the following years, there was a skyrocket. Now there's 14 years of research data to show that anxiety, depression, and suicide has skyrocketed in basically any kids that have it. So a lot of it's early teens, but kids as young as 8, 7 who have been given cell phones and spend any amount of time on them are experiencing the same impacts. And so it's a little bit scary to think about. I did a little bit of math when I first started this project before I dug into all of the research. And basically, if you take the amount of time that the average North American teenager spends on a phone or on a screen, which could be phones or video games, some sort of internet-connected device, the average is 7 to 9 hours a day. That does not include time they spend doing homework or using screens for school-related purposes. So 7 to 9 hours. And this is not an exaggeration. we can also check to confirm, like, is that even possible? We can check our own screen time usage. And that can be a very humbling thing to do. I don't know if your phones ding on Sunday morning. The Apple phones on Sunday mornings like to give you a report of your average daily screen time usage. And I personally know it's not that difficult to reach that number of hours. But if we take that and say, if the average is 7 to 9, so let's just for easy math, say 8 hours a day. Some more, some less, but an average of 8 hours a day. And if you extrapolate that over the next 50 years, so you have teenagers, and in 50 years, they're going to be in their 60s, so retirement age. That is 6,083 days. That is 869 weeks. That's 200 months, or 16.65 years of their life. So if they continue on the course that they're on, which there is no indication that they wouldn't, because the average adult spends 9 to 10 hours a day on their phone. So there's no reason that suddenly it would go down unless there is an intentional choice to make it go down. That is almost 17 years of their life that they will spend not dancing, not laughing, not running, not playing, not making art, not working, not building a business, not being connected to themselves or to other people. And that's not okay. It's not a wonder, like when you hear that amount of time, it's not a wonder that they would feel anxious or depressed or stressed out, because it's too much. As human beings, we are not designed or evolved to spend all of our time staring at a small box. That's not what we were designed for. It's really easy to brush off a few hours here and there. And like, well, because individually, an hour of playing video games in the big picture isn't that much. Just like eating a McDonald's hamburger once in a while is not that much. But if you eat a McDonald's hamburger for every single meal, you're going to end up severely malnourished and not able to function. And that's what's happening, is that we are wired for connection. We are wired to want to interact with people. And especially at the preteen age and the early teen age, even more, we are wired at that age to want to separate ourselves a little bit from our parents and really connect with our peers and find information other places. And so we have just basically handed them a tool that allows them to connect, but it's all fake, fast food, false connection. None of it's real. And so we have unknowingly and unwittingly given them basically what would be considered like a small dose of poison. One little dose of poison, like where we have strong immune systems, we can bounce back. But every day for the rest of their lives, they will slowly wither up. And it's been shown now, because the research, they have so many years now of quantitative research, that depression has gone up. Research has found that teenagers who spend more time on social media and other screens are more likely to become depressed. Girls have had a 145% increase of major depression since 2010, according to a U.S. national survey on drug use and health. And a lot of this for girls is constantly comparing themselves to idealized images, not only of influencers and celebrities, but their friends. Their friends can post the most idealized version of themselves with filters on. And even though in the conscious part of their brain, they can be like, oh, they're using a filter, the unconscious part of their brain doesn't make the difference and will constantly compare what they see in the mirror with what they're seeing on the screen. And so every day they're making those comparisons. Plus, the algorithms are designed to, it has been also admitted by social media companies, have been designed to hook them in and make it addictive. There's a feedback loop and it gives them more of what they're looking at. So if they're looking at idealized images and they pause on them, it will give them more. And so For me, Instagram is a pretty educational place because I tend to pause and watch either parental humor, which is good for the soul, and I'm not saying Instagram is great for me either, but I'm saying that my feed is filled with things that are educational, uplifting, or humorous. Whereas for most teen girls, if you take their phones and just spend some time scrolling, it is models and influencers, and they're designed to find role models at this age. And the role models they are now choosing are idealized influencers who don't have necessarily good character qualities or skills to offer, who just have this, a look. And so they spend a lot of their time trying to follow this mentor. And it's impossible for them to ever match up to it. And even if they did, is that what we want our daughters to match up to? Is that what we want them to spend their time striving for? It's just a question that, like, for me, having a 14-year-old daughter hits me really, really hard. For boys, according to the same study, boys have had a 161 increase in major depression since 2010. And then the same study showed that there was a 106% increase in anxiety across college students. Suicide rates have gone up by quite a lot. Suicide rates for both boys at 91% and girls at 167% have both skyrocketed since 2010, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. Now, it's important for us to recognize these don't tell the whole story. There are other factors involved, but some of those are connected, meaning even if I choose to limit what my daughter can access online or on social media, if she is going to school or events where all of her friends are sitting there staring at their phones instead of interacting, it's like secondhand smoking. We experience, when we personally spend more time on social media, we isolate ourselves. If everyone around us is spending all their time on social media, we are isolated secondarily. And so the groups that we create, the environments that we cultivate are super important. And that's why these are such important conversations to have on a very local and micro level with our friends' parents, with those in our community, because we have the opportunity to affect change really pretty quickly and dramatically. Like all of these things, while on a global level are scary, on an individual level are very hopeful, because we have the choice about all of it. Just like we have the choice about whether or not we go eat a McDonald's hamburger every day or whether we put nourishing food in our body. The thing with teenagers is that if they were given a choice, not all of them, but most of them, if they were given a choice between a really delicious home-cooked meal with great ingredients or a McDonald's hamburger, well, they'll choose the path of least resistance. So if they're right next to each other, they might choose the home-cooked meal. But teenagers will always choose the path of least resistance. So if they can get this easy and fast, then they will. So in the range of desiring acceptance and connection, if they have to choose between posting a photo and hoping it gets likes, or going out and facing the stress of interacting with people in real life and developing social skills, it's way easier to post a photo with a filter on it and have all of your friends be like, fire, so hot, you're beautiful, I love you, or not. And that's another part of this feedback loop, is that especially with girls, they will seek affirmation on these online mediums. And then if it doesn't come, or if it's less than a friend, or if it doesn't come fast enough, then they beat themselves up over it and try again. And it's like they're spending crucial years of their life that should be spent developing social skills, instead trying to figure out what the algorithm and their online friends like. And online, they can connect with hundreds of people, but never have a true deep connection. And we all know that it is better to have one or two close friends that you can sit down with and share your heart with, and who can hold you when you cry, and who you can flop on their couch and vent and get mad at things together and build each other up. Like, one or two friends like that is worth 100 people that might click thumbs up or like on your photo, as far as what nourishes our soul. And so we have to ask ourselves, how can we give our children more of that? The other factor that is also involved is that we as parents have to be really humble and really honest about our own habits. And this is something that since before starting this project, because I was inspired to do it before, but in the last 6 months, I have given my children, before I would cut down on their screen time, and then they'd be like, Mom, why are you on your phone? I'm working. Because I do work on my phone, but somehow, because it's on my phone along with Instagram and Facebook and all of these other things that are addictive, little bit of work, little bit of scroll, little bit of work, little bit of scroll, and suddenly my own screen time hours are way up high, but I have the excuse to my kids, I'm working. And so I have given them permission to call me out, because as a mom, I cannot ask of them what I'm not willing to do myself. I can't ask them to be present if I'm not going to be present with them. So I have to be conscious and set my work hours and set the times that I might be using it, and let that be clear to them. And if I'm using it outside of those hours, then let them call me out on it. Give them give them the authority to do that, because they will, and they love it. And it makes them more willing to face the issue of family connectivity together if they know that you are willing to do it with them, because there's not that same double standard. And while there are a lot of things that parents have double standards with, like, well, why do you get to stay up past 8:30 at night? Because I'm a grown-up. Why do you get to buy that? Because I earned the money for it. There are certain things that, yes, grown-ups can have a beer when they want, kids cannot. There are certain things that we have a double standard for, but this one especially, I think we are training them on a subconscious level of how they deserve to be treated. So if we're at a meal with them and we pull out our phone, we're saying it's okay if your partner ignores you when you're on a date. It's okay if you ignore the people you're with. We're modeling for them. Even if we have a rule and we say, okay, well, this is real quick. This is just a business thing. Like, it would be better to excuse ourselves completely and go take a call or answer an important message and then return and be 100% present, because we can't ask them to be 100% present if we are not willing to also be 100% present. So another thing that is the opposite side of the coin, or the other part of this, is that the opportunity cost. So I've just said all these like scary statistics about social media and phones and everything. But another thing that all of us, I think, have some sort of perspective on is what our childhoods were like, as far as what kinds of risks were we allowed to take, what kind of responsibilities did we have, and how has that changed now? So we can probably all think of examples of, well, when I was a kid, I started babysitting when I was 10 years old. And that is much less common now. Maybe in some families it happens, but I know for my kids didn't start babysitting until my oldest was 12. He was a boy. I don't know if that makes a difference. But when I was a kid, we would go out and ride our bikes. I was allowed, my parents didn't know where I rode my bike. I rode my bike to a friend's house who lived 4 miles away across a 6-lane highway. And I would stop on the way and use my money to buy us snacks, and then I would go to their house. And as long as I came back before dark, they didn't mind where I was. It was fine. Whereas, even with my own kids, I was like, okay, well, you're allowed to ride around these 4 blocks in our neighborhood because I know those are the ones that are safe. Kids used to be able to go, and this is something that's different and kind of cool about living in Mexico, is in the United States now, at least, kids used to be able to go to a playground and play with their friends unsupervised. If it was a neighborhood playground, they could go play by themselves. Now you can have the cops called on you for your kids playing in your front yard unsupervised. And this has happened to many families. It's unfathomable. So we became, as statistics came out, and there were some scary news reports in the late 90s about child kidnapping and abduction and things like that, parents became very, very safety conscious. And they started keeping their kids home more, allowing them to explore less, and watching more TV and spending more time just inside their own space. And so we lost a sense of community. But the other part of this is that kids need a certain amount of risk-taking for healthy development. Kids need a certain amount of doing things independently, all on their own, unsupervised by parents, for healthy development. Kids need to go do things with their friends and sometimes fall and break their wrist. And that's part of healthy development. And we have bubble wrapped our kids so much in this particular generation. And we can't speak for every family, but as a general trend, this is what the researchers have observed, is that we have put such a high value on physical safety that it has inhibited their social, emotional development and growth. Then you combine that with suddenly having unlimited access to a computer in their pocket. We had access even when I was a teenager in the late 90s. We suddenly got email. We suddenly had the internet, but it was on a big computer and it had to dial up, and your whole family was there and could see whatever you were looking at, and everyone wanted a turn. And so it wasn't like you were going to spend all day every day. Like there was no way your parents were going to let you be on there for 8 hours a day because they wanted to use it. Your brothers and sisters wanted to use it. They could see you on there. There was just, they couldn't take it to school with them or out to the park with them. So now that kids can literally have 24/7 access to their smartphones, parents have overrated physical safety, but not done nearly enough to protect them with their digital safety. And what I found really interesting was, so in the process of writing up this guidebook, I read several books and listened to a bunch of different podcasts and looked at all of these studies. And then I conducted interviews with parents. I basically put the call out, and said, I'm looking for parents who have stressed out teenagers. And I didn't say because of being on their cell phones or whatever. I just wanted to be able to ask questions and see if any of it came to naturally unearthed. And so I found that in the process of interviewing all of these parents, everything that I saw in the research was being confirmed in parents' personal experiences. And so it was very telling. And one of the parents that I interviewed was a former police officer. And she said, I think I have a pretty good handle. My kids aren't super stressed out or anxious, but I wanted to be interviewed because I've cleaned up the bodies of kids who were harmed, either self-harmed, committed suicide because of things that were happening on social media, or kids that were harmed by people who were blackmailing them. Because right now it's gotten to the point where people who are predators don't need to go looking for your kids in the parks anymore, because our kids are not in the parks anymore. They can simply create an identity online as another 12-year-old and talk to you and charm you or threaten you, manipulate you in some way. Because they're adults who have way more life experience and the ability to talk, and they can talk these kids into giving them pictures. They find out information through conversation with them, and they become close to them. They get pictures, and then they blackmail them. And this mom, who was a police officer, said, she said, parents have no idea. And she said the parents who feel like they're safe because they have various apps or protections, she said the kids are smarter than those protections. And they don't get out of it because they want to go looking for predators. They just, all of the kids know and can find out from other kids or can YouTube it, like how to get around this app. You know, kids aren't allowed to have social media. So there are ways of getting social media and hiding it behind really safe looking apps like a calculator. And parents have no idea for years. And so her point was just like, why are parents so over-focused on physical safety and under-focused on this digital safety? And then talking some of the other things that came up in the interviews, for example, were parents whose kids were severely anxious or depressed, and they didn't really have any idea that it was connected to social media. And I was trying to, in the interviews, remain as neutral as possible. I wasn't there to place blame or to be like, well, you should do this or whatever. They'll all get a free copy of the guidebook when it's done, and then they can read it or not and come to their own conclusions. But it was really, really sad for me to hear, for example, some of these kids who are severely depressed, they're in therapy, they're going to various different types of therapies and interventions, but then hearing that they stay up most of the night on social media, and it has not even occurred to the parents that there's any connection between this. Another category of people in the interviews were young adults, 19, 20 years old, who had sort of what we would call failure to launch, who basically have reached that age without any usable skills or enough confidence to go out and like look for a job. And so they stay at home where it's safe and where they are taken care of and they feel protected because their parents have always protected them. Their parents created a system where like, you're the child and I'm the parent, and did not give them age-appropriate opportunities to go out and take risks and fail sometimes. And by the time they get to 19 or 20, without having those opportunities to take risks, to fall down, to fail, to try again, to succeed, these kids are crippled. And the parents are like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get them out of their room. We rob them of the social and emotional development they need to become functioning adults. Kids who look up, who spend their time searching for images and or chatting with AI girlfriends or boyfriends, who don't ever have to take a risk and ask someone out on a date or risk getting turned down, who then have no ability to connect on a romantic level. And then they reach young adulthood and are insanely lonely because the path of least resistance is to go look up pictures online or to chat with an AI girlfriend. And then they have no skills because we as parents let them take the path of least resistance instead of encouraging them to get out there and do it. And on the topic of failure, like this risk taking, we need to fail. We need to fail lots, because failing is how we learn that it's not the end of the world to fail. When we take risks, sometimes we will succeed and sometimes we will fail. But I think a lot of times we learn more from the failure than we do from the successes, because we learn, number one, that we're resilient and that it's okay, and that, all right, you don't learn to ride a bike without falling and maybe skinning your knee. You don't learn how to cook a meal without burning a few things. You can't learn how to cook a meal by reading a cookbook. If you never actually get the ingredients and put them together, you will never learn to cook. And that is true of every important life skill. We have to actually try it, and we have to fail a little bit, and we have to learn that it's okay to fail, and then we have to try again until we succeed. And we so badly want to protect our kids from failure that they miss out on the important development that is a part of it's part of our growth. It's part of our journey. And we do our kids a disservice. Our kids need to, as early as possible, be taking age-appropriate risks, be given age-appropriate responsibilities, and when they fail, be offered lots of encouragement. And I think for a lot of us, we may have grown up in families that failure was not allowed, and we may have been punished for it. And so instead of fixing that by encouraging our kids to try, fail, and then giving them a safe space to get up and dust themselves off in, we prevent failure altogether, which creates a bigger problem. Let me find where I am. So there's a concept, let me find my research. There's a concept known as anti-fragility. Has anyone heard of that phrase before? Anti-fragility. So anti-fragility. Okay, so anti-fragility was coined by Nassim Nicholas, and he has a book called Anti-Fragile, The Things That Gain from the Disorder. So we've all heard of resilience. Resilience is the concept I was just talking about of learning that when you fail, you have to get back up. It's learning that we can overcome our weaknesses. Anti-fragility is a term that means you actually get stronger when you're faced with stressors. So there are certain things in our world that we can, like some practical examples of things that get stronger from stressors. So examples of biology, our immune systems. Our immune systems have to face stressors. They have to face certain viruses and bacteria in order to get stronger. Otherwise, they will get weaker. Exercise is another example. When our muscles are stressed, then they grow. If we never stress our muscles, that's why our muscles are sore the next day after a workout. You work out or you walk up a really big hill when you haven't walked up a big hill in a while, and the next day your body is feeling stressed from all the tiny tears in the muscle. But that is a good thing because then it gets stronger. So it's not just resilient. Resilient is falling down and getting back up. Anti-fragile is growing stronger from a stressor. There's examples in economics where businesses, some types of businesses thrive during market volatility. So, for example, if prices go up due to inflation, then in turn the discount retailers or the dollar stores or the cheap places, they get a boost in sales. So this can be seen all across our natural world, and we as humans are anti-fragile. But we have a choice in when these stressors come to us, how we respond. And this is something that we can teach our kids, because if we teach them that when they fall down, just don't try again, or it's not okay, then we are not teaching them or instilling anti-fragility. But when we give them environments and spaces and opportunities where they do fail and then they can grow from it and get stronger, then we are actually setting them up to be really successful adults. Because what we know for sure in life is that things will always change. We will always be faced with barriers. We will always be faced with obstacles. And we have the ability to get up again, and not just get up again, but learn from that and do it better the next time. And so this type of this type of quality, this anti-fragile quality, is something that we want to instill in our kids. But we can't do that if they have a finite amount of time and energy in a day. If the majority of that time is being spent plugged in digitally, they simply do not have the time and energy just space in their life to be out there learning these anti-fragile lessons. My goal isn't really in this talk to get into the super specifics of like what you should or shouldn't be doing as a family as far as the kinds of agreements or limits or boundaries you want to put on screen time. But my goal is more to just like throw out these questions, these ideas, these statistics, and these thoughts so that we can come up with solutions. And there is no one size fits all solution that's going to work for every single family. Just like the types of anyone who has more than one child knows that the way you parent one child doesn't necessarily work on the second child. And if you figure out something that works on the first and second, then it's probably not going to work on the third. Every child, you have to tailor your parenting to each child and their needs. And the same is true of families and how they come up with the rules or the boundaries or guidelines in their family. So the goal isn't to say, do A, B, C, D, and then you'll prevent all of these troubles and everything. But the goal is to put out some of these ideas so that then we can discuss our own experiences and brainstorm ways in which we as a community, whether local or more of a global community at large, what are the strategies that we can do? So some of them that, and I will have a discussion time later, but some of the ones that I really, really like are talking to schools. I don't know all of the different schools here in our community, but I am very, very grateful that the schools that my kids have been involved with so far don't allow cell phone usage in school. But that is not the case in a lot of other places. And I don't know if it's the case across Mexico or in all of the schools. I don't know what the rules are. But in a lot of the interviews I did, they said, I wish my kids didn't use their phones at school, but they are encouraged to. They have apps that are part of their schoolwork. And so they have their phones on them all the time because they're using them. They have digital resources on them. And so there's no way for teachers to monitor if they're using their digital resources for school or if they're scrolling on social media. But I think conversations in schools where that's the case, like going as parents and talking to the school administrators and showing them the research and advocating for phone-free schools is really important, because then at least they have that break while they're trying to learn something, because they not only need that to focus on their education, but to interact with their peers. It is so much harder for kids who enter a school where phones are allowed to even connect with someone in the first few months at lunch, because everyone's phones are out. And we as adults know this. There are way less casual meetups, conversations, bumping into strangers and making friends out in public spaces now than there were in the past, because people are always engaged. I will use it as a social anxiety, like if I'm waiting for someone, for instance, and I'm in a crowd, it feels less awkward to pull out a phone and be looking at it or scrolling or listening to something than it does to stand there and just look around. You feel sort of naked and vulnerable. And so we use it ourselves. So our kids are going to use it even more, because if we have a little bit of social anxiety, I promise you that a 12 or 13-year-old has more social anxiety than any of you. They are at like preteen and early teens. They're like at the height of needing to fit in, needing to feel okay, needing to not be different. So their social anxiety is way up higher. And so it just makes it really hard for them to connect with people on the first time. So advocating for phone-free schools. And then obviously, there are solutions to be found within our families with as far as the limits we put, but then also advocating for creating community spaces that are phone-free. And also where kids can have lots and lots of unstructured playtime together. So I will use the example of my friend Tina, who I don't remember how long, a year and a half ago, started creating like weekly park meetups. And she just will post in the kids group and be like, my family's going to be at the park from 3 to 6. Here's the address. Join us and come play. And then families go and they join and play. And no one's like, all right, kids, now we have to play this game, or now you have to do this activity, I assume. The kids just go at it. And they can create their own games. They can play with the whole group. They can play on an individual level. But that type of unstructured play is critical to their development. And so more of that in our community, in our neighborhoods, more after-school play groups instead of filling up every available hour with structured activities. I am also a fan of other structure. There's other great activities that kids can do that are way better than screen time. Musical theater club, soccer, taekwondo. There's lots of great activities that kids can be doing that are super healthy for their development. But do not fill up all of their free time with those things and not give them the free, it's that relaxation, free play with their friends, which they so very, very much need. And so the more of those opportunities we can create here in our community, the more our kids will thrive. That's where the friendships become deeper. That's where they find people to confide in. That's where they find people to connect with. That's where they learn to resolve differences. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I have never seen deep conflict successfully resolved in a digital means. I've seen minor misunderstandings get cleared up, but especially teenagers do not have the communication skills to resolve conflicts online. And when they're at this anxious age, if they have a conflict with someone, they can want to withdraw. And it's really, really easy online to block someone, delete someone, not interact with them anymore. But we live in a community, and I want my kids to grow up in a space where if they if they have a unfortunate interaction or a fight or something with a friend, that they're going to have to see them again. And they're going to have to work it out. They also learn to work things out quickly. If you say something mean online, you don't know how the person is going to react when they read it alone. But if you say something mean and you see another child's feelings get hurt, your empathy can kick in immediately, and you can adjust your behavior or your attitude to follow the natural human impulse to make it better. And kids learn to be really, really mean online. And they are. Even nice kids, which I think all kids have their nice moments and their butthole moments. Like, they all can be nice or mean in different situations. But even what you would consider nice kids can unintentionally really hurt someone online. And they just don't have the experience or skills to navigate that yet. According to the researchers, the recommended ages for getting, and this, every family is going to do what they need to do, but the recommended ages for getting a smartphone with no social media is not until 14 or 15. Because the crucial developmental window of when they need the most practice interacting with their friends and getting that social feedback loop in person, face to face, happens between the ages of 10 and 15. And the researchers recommend not getting social media. Well, they wish they could say 18, but they feel like that's unrealistic. So they recommend 16 as the minimum age for social media. Because before that's when, if it's introduced, they already have developed certain social habits, and they've reached a point in development where, with guidance and being intentional, they can potentially learn how to use it safely. Before that, they simply do not have enough social development to be able to use it in a safe way. Every family sort of has to look at the information and do what they will with it. I'm just sharing what the researchers say. So I'm going to kind of wrap up with my story before we get to some kind of like discussion and question and answer. When my teens were going through the pandemic and I was watching them become more and more socially isolated, in December of 2020, we made the move to come to Mexico. And we realized pretty quickly that our kids were not going to be happy unless they made friends. Because now any chance they had, which it was very low already because everything was locked down, any chance they had of seeing in-person friends was basically gone. And so in January of 2021, I put out the call to see who else has teenagers and who would be willing to meet in person, socially distanced, whatever we needed to do for everyone to feel safe and okay with coming and being together. And we met outside at a coffee shop in a big circle. And it was incredible to see, there was 8 kids that came that day. And it was incredible to see the awkward eagerness that they all had. None of them had interacted with other teenagers in the last 10 months. And yet they were so desperate for that interaction. And so I realized at that moment that this was something that they desperately needed for their mental and emotional health. And so I made a commitment that I would put on some sort of activity for them every Saturday. And we did. And it took a few months for the sort of awkwardness to wear off and for them to get into a groove and start interacting and, even exchanging numbers. I don't think it was until our first camping trip that they actually all exchanged numbers and then started setting up some of their own getting together and hanging out outside of that. But it was really beautiful to see. Within that first year, we went from 8 families to over 40 families. And it was amazing to see suddenly how these kids who were interacting in person and building these healthy, connected relationships in a community of parents who were involved and active and holding this space for them. And the kind of cool thing was they didn't want to be on their phones because at that time, that's what they were doing the rest of the time. So when they were with their friends, they were with their friends. And my heart would burst every single time because I would see them so alive and so vibrant, and they were thriving when it felt like the rest of the world kids were still struggling. I have a lot of teacher friends in Texas, and they were, when we were hitting our 1-year mark, they were all going back to school in person, and they were saying, these kids don't know how to interact with each other anymore. These kids don't have any social skills. Some of them are academically behind, but they were socially stunted. And so many kids have not recovered yet socially and emotionally from the isolation they experienced during the pandemic. And or even if everything in their life has returned to normal, the habits that were put into place and the groundwork that was laid never changed again. They are still just as digitally plugged in as they were then, and they're on a trajectory to stay that way. There are so many kids who are lonely and isolated and anxious and stressed out and depressed. And my heart goes out to them. I'm watching our community here thrive and grow, and these kids have these deep, juicy, interactive friendships and lots of appropriate risk-taking. And, we have this wonderful nest of a community where my kid might leave my house with his friends and then end up at someone else's house, and I'll text the parent chat and be like, all right, where's my kid? And someone's like, oh, well, they were here for a while and ate, but now they're at so-and-so's house. And to know that there's this community that holds them, and that there is a certain amount of co-parenting that happens. And we don't all have the same rules. We don't, there are families of vastly varying belief systems. Some people are religious, some people are not religious, people of varying political spectrum of what they believe. But our common focus is that we love our kids, and we are putting their health and safety and social emotional well-being in front of any differences. And that's the thing that we all have in common. And it is a really beautiful, beautiful thing to witness. In the last year and a half, as I am doing all these activities with the kids, creating camps and taking them on camping trips and having game nights and scavenger hunts and races and movie nights and all these fun things we do with them, the project that we are currently launching is doing adventure camps for kids in the US who are feeling disconnected to be able to come down and plug into this juicy, special place that we have. And that's just my way of seeing, I can't fix the whole world and I can't have an impact on every kid, but I can work to create spaces and experiences here and include as many kids as want to opt into that. And so that is my vision with these adventure camps. It's called Teen Connected Ventures, where I will be bringing kids from the United States to come down, or anywhere, but I'm starting, there, to come down and have a adventure and cultural and volunteer experience where they'll get to come and experience the energy here is different. Anyone who's spent some time here knows the pace of life is slower, the energy is different, and we've got something really, really special. And I want them to be able to spend time with our local kids here. I want them to be able to get outside of their comfort zones and stretch them and let them grow and let them be completely unplugged while doing that, so that they can truly connect with themselves and with other people. And so that's my personal mission. Every human being has their own mission that they are here to accomplish during their lifetime, and that's mine. And I share that just because I want people to be aware, so that if you ever encounter someone who has that need or that you feel would benefit from that, you can share it with them, because I have found that word of mouth and personal sharing is the very best form of getting the word out there.